Joining us right now, as he does every Tuesday morning, our Congressman, Carlos Curbelo. Good morning, Mr. Congressman.
Bill, good morning to you and to Chuck from elementary school today.
Thanks for joining us. I know
you want to go to school.
Every day you drop off your kids there at school.
Yep, dropping off and then headed to the airport because we have a very busy and could be interesting week in Washington, D.C.
I'm sure. Let's talk about that week. You've got the possibility of a government shutdown, a lot of sword rattling here going on. What's happening here?
Well, it's a real possibility. I'd say that since I've been in Washington, it's been 3 years now, we're at the greatest risk of a shutdown this week for a number of reasons. Chief among them is that there's still no immigration deal. The negotiators, and I'm one of them, for weeks have been working on getting a deal that will secure the future for these DACA recipients, these young immigrants who were brought to this country as children through no fault of their own, and then also trying to strengthen border security and strengthen some of our immigration laws. I'm still hopeful that we can get a deal by the end of the week. The majority leader, Kevin McCarthy, is leading the negotiations on our side, and he was with the president this weekend. And he's working with Steny Hoyer on the Democratic side, and then with Republican and Democratic leaders in the Senate as well. So there's a chance, but it'll be difficult. And if we get that deal, then I think it will be fairly easy to avoid shutdown. But aside from that, a lot of members are also frustrated with these temporary extensions of government funding. This is no way to run the largest, most complex enterprise in the world, which is the government of the United States of America, funding it weeks at a time. It has a very perverse effect on our military because they can't plan long term, and really on every federal agency. So, yes, Bill, I would say, without wanting to scare people, that there is significant risk for a breakdown later this week that ends to probably a very short shutdown of the government. But it would not be something positive at all.
Would you vote against a deal if it did not include DACA?
That is my intention right now, and this is something that I've really been loath to do because keeping the government open is obviously a major priority. But I also can't stand idle while 800,000 lives are at risk. I know a lot of these young people. Many of them live in South Florida. They work here. They contribute to our economy. They pay taxes. They better their communities. And for them to lose everything come March is just unacceptable to me. So I think that we have to do everything we can to apply positive pressure on Congress to act on this. Everyone knows where the deal is. It can be a reasonable deal that keeps everyone happy. Most Americans want stronger border security. Most Americans want coherent immigration laws that are enforced. And most Americans want to provide these young immigrants with an opportunity to stay in our country, work in our country, and continue contributing to it. So I do think that this is one of those cases where you do have to draw the line and say, I'm making these demands because human lives are at risk, and my intention is to vote for a bill to continue funding the government along with a solution to this immigration quandary.
Does that include a wall?
Well, the term wall means different things to different people. As far as I'm concerned, what matters is smart border security. We know there's a lot of drug trafficking at the southwest border. We know there's plenty of human trafficking as well. If we can focus on the area that's most prevalent and a more robust security system in those areas, meaning yes, physical barriers, but also observation towers, deploying drone technologies, perhaps hiring more border agents. All of that is part of border security. The president chose during the campaign to call it a wall, and I suspect he's going to continue using that terminology. but it's really much more than that. And the truth is we already have about 600 miles of fencing, physical barriers along the border. So if we're just making that more robust and more expansive, I think it's reasonable, so long as we're not proposing building a fence or a wall from end to end of the border, which would just be a massive waste of public dollars.
Speaking of the president's terminology, his use of a rather vulgar phrase referring to African nations and Haiti seemed to be coloring the discussion this week. Who do you believe?
Well, here's what I can tell you. Obviously, I was not at that meeting, so I don't know exactly what was said, but I think it's pretty obvious that something derogatory was said, and that's obviously not helpful, and that's not the way I was raised to speak. And I think we need to judge people not by what countries they come from, but by what they can contribute, by the content of their character, as Dr. Martin Luther King taught us. We just celebrated him yesterday. So it's a shame. It was a setback for sure. But what matters more than what was said at the White House last week is what Congress and the White House do together to address this immigration issue. And if we can build that compromise, which on Tuesday of last week, the president assured us would be a bill of love. If we do pass a bill of love, then that will eclipse anything that was said that was hurtful. And certainly I have a great deal of respect and admiration specifically for a lot of Haitians and Haitian Americans that live in South Florida and contribute to our economy. They work in many establishments from tip to tip of Florida, all the way from Key West up to Jacksonville. And they're just an important part of our community. Same goes for Salvadorans, Hondurans, Nicaraguans, all of those that benefit today from the TPS program.
One more issue, of course, the affordable housing issue in the wake of Hurricane Irma. We just got the news yesterday that the 5 respondents to the Navy's request for interest all say that the units there, 166 units, should be torn down and rebuilt. This is going to push the time frame back for any possible solution at this level here.
Well, that's a project that is definitely worth building. And the good news, Bill, is that we have some 160 and change units now, and all the requests for information, all of the proposals show between 290 and 322 units, meaning that we can double the amount of housing that those Sigsbee units offer today. And look, my office has been working on this for a long time. It is a big deal. It is something that could really provide relief to the Key West community and really all of the Lower Keys community, and also help the Navy because they are having trouble finding housing for their employees. So the Navy believes that a legislative language is necessary for them to proceed. So we're going to work hard to get that language enacted either through the National Defense Authorization Act or as a standalone measure. But what I can say with confidence is that we are on our way to expanding housing in Key West. These are going to be affordable units. They're going to be available to Navy employees, and that's obviously going to provide relief in other parts of the island and throughout the Lower Keys. So something to celebrate. It's not going to happen overnight because nothing with the government does. But we are definitely on the right path after many years of uncertainty.
Congressman Carlos Curbelo, thanks for joining us this morning. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you. You all have a good week, Bill.
You too. Take care.